Welcome to the Washdown podcast, and tonight's guest is Rob Hughes. Rob is a news reporter, news anchor here at a local TV station, and also he is an infantry officer with the Kansas Army National Guard. And, you know, me and him and Chris had a great conversation. We talked about a wide variety of things, leadership and just a lot of stuff. So hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as we enjoyed making it. Don't forget to like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube and all that stuff. So here you go. Here's the Washdown podcast with special guest Rob Hughes.
I'm used to asking questions. I thought this time you're going to ask me.
Oh, yeah. No, you're on the spot now, buddy.
Oh, no. Okay. Shoot, we'll figure something out. Yeah, I can come up with something.
Well, you know, it is interesting when you get somebody who's used to asking the questions.
Yeah.
And then they're the ones who have to answer the questions.
Yeah. Or I can ask you guys questions, but I don't want to hijack your show.
You know? I can't wait till we ask some questions and we get that funny look like it's a terrible question, but he's super nice and doesn't want to say that.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we're doing.
All right. Or answer a question with a question.
Yeah.
Or that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. The political answer.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, we call that bridging in public affairs because that's one of the things I do in the military is, I can't really talk about that, but I think we should really focus on, like, I advise generals on how to do that, and that's how you kind of bridge. So you kind of don't answer the question, but you try and steer them towards what you want to answer. It's pretty tough, though. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And where did we, go wrong with the whole, just answer the question? Yeah. Why not just give a simple answer? And yes or no is a complete sentence, by the way.
And I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer for a question. If you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we advise is, say I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. That's the best answer. No comment's never a good answer, I think, because it seems like you're hiding something.
Yeah.
But we'll do murder boards to where you do like fake interviews and then the bridging techniques I mentioned. But you have talking points you want to hit, and so it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if public speaking was easy, everybody would do it and be great at it.
Exactly.
You wouldn't have all those memes.
Right.
Well, Rob, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it very much. So why don't you introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, it's an honor and privilege to be here, guys. I appreciate all you do. And my name's Rob Hughes. I'm a professional television broadcaster here in local media in Kansas City. I'm an anchor reporter at the ABC CW affiliate. And then my other job is I'm an infantry officer and a public affairs officer in the Army National Guard, specifically for the 35th Infantry Division, which is based out of Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And then I'm about to switch over in April to the 105th MPAD, which is a mobile public affairs detachment. So it's almost going to be kind of like running like a small newsroom in a way. Mm-hmm. So the soldiers I'm going to lead are responsible for covering all the content throughout the state of what's going on basically with the Kansas Army National Guard. And then I've been involved with veteran service organizations and first responder service organizations a lot the last several years. When I moved here in 2016, emceed a lot of events. I've served on boards myself. One of the great things about Kansas City is the support we have for veterans and first responders and a variety of other great causes in town. So I try and stay involved with that as much as I can and volunteer as much as I can as well as what I'm passionate about.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a lot to unpack.
It is.
Oh.
And we're, like we stated earlier, we are not professional question askers.
I really wish I would have had a notepad and I was taking notes with what he was saying.
I don't really think I am either. But hey, it'll be like an elephant, guys. One bite at a time. All right. Wherever you want to start, let's roll with it.
Well, so one of the things that I'm kind of interested in, obviously the charity work and the nonprofits and stuff that you've been involved with and associated with, but also on the military side of the public affairs stuff. Like, how does that, as much as you can talk about it, you know, I'm sure there's stuff you can't, but like, how does that work as far as like, you know, is it for stateside stuff like natural disaster stuff with the National Guard and like you're the person who's like doing the press releases and things like that, or is it?
It's kind of a hybrid. I'm pretty, to be honest, I'm pretty new to it. What happened was on my first deployment to Ukraine, 2016, 2017, because of my civilian job, I became a UPAR, which is a unit public affairs representative. So what I was doing was just kind of helping out the public affairs officer. And you have a branch. I'm an infantry officer, and then if you're in there long enough, they'll give you another job, so to speak. And so the lady I was working with was a field artillery officer, and then she had an NCO. And so that's kind of my first dabble into public affairs in the military. And then this last deployment, which I got back from in November, I was in Southwest Asia and the Middle East, specifically Qatar for most of it. And then since I haven't gone to school in the military to be a public affairs officer yet, I'm going later this year. I basically they gave me the job, and I had a lot of on-the-job experience, but I wasn't officially trained to do it. And so the guys I was working with who were great, but who they had gone to school for it, I just kind of made up a title of public affairs support officer in Qatar. And where I was at, and I wasn't doing any type of black ops stuff, but we weren't allowed to talk specifically or in any type of public capacity what we're doing there specifically. Yeah. And so what we did is primarily focused on the soldier story. So we do a lot of stuff on social media, a lot of highlights of what soldiers are doing. And I've worked a lot with press releases, but I haven't officially gone to public affairs school. It's called the Defense Information School at Fort Meade, Maryland, which I'm going later this year. Yeah, but what I'm going to be doing after I go through that school is press releases, press conferences. Kind of a lot of what I did overseas was advising. I worked for a 1-star general as well as a colonel at the little base I was at. And advise them a lot on. We never really had to do press conferences where I was at or press releases. We worked at the Department of State, and they had their own media team out there at the embassy in Doha, Qatar, and they would handle any messaging to the public. And so when I trained the unit that was replacing us that's out there now, when we would murder board them, which means just do mock interviews, whenever as like role playing a reporter, so to speak, I would ask them, hey, can you tell us about Camp Osley at Qatar? They would say, oh, well, I need to defer to Department of State on that, really. So it was just an easy answer. Yeah. But going back to your question of stateside, so say there is a tornado or there's a natural disaster or there's an event to where the National Guard responds, then we work with, we have our team, and then also there's another team at the state level who handles press releases as well. Like for example, we're having a change of command upcoming early March, coming up this weekend at the time of this recording. So it's going to be March 4th, and that's going to be a new commanding general for the 35th. So that's a 2-star, and it was that release has already been sent out, but it wasn't from a military team. It was from a civilian who works in Topeka, where the headquarters is, who sends out stuff like that. So it's kind of like a partnership between the military side, and then you have civilians who work in the military as well. But not only that, I mean, your job as public affairs is of course you, just like any public affairs agencies in any city, I mean, you're representing an organization, you're defending an organization, you're doing damage control if something goes wrong. and that's
nothing ever goes wrong.
And that's what we did a lot when I was overseas, is you develop a holding statement. So if something is going to go wrong, you think that could cause negative media attention, you come out with you already come up with a statement, basically, is what you'll initially send, and then once you get more information, you'll send out a full-on press release. And so I would do a lot of those, but that was just kind of my recommendations to the Department of State, but they would have the final say because it was a humanitarian mission I was doing, and so we were working for them. But it's public affairs is fascinating. It's I'd like to say it's similar to journalism and media, but it is in some ways. In a lot of ways, it's different. It's not. A lot of people go into that industry. A lot of my friends who've worked in media, but there's quite a bit to learn how to be successful at it. Yeah.
So were you in Qatar during the World Cup?
I left right before it, which is a bummer because if I would have stayed there, or if I would have still been there, we probably would have been able to see a game. But we were at a little base that used to be an R&R base.
Okay.
And they had since converted it for a humanitarian mission, and it was fascinating. It was a fascinating mission, just working with people from all over the world. It was very rewarding work we're doing, working with units from all over the country and a lot of interagencies as well. A lot of distinguished visitors, they call them DVs in the military, or VIPs, but a lot of them were coming through where I was at, and it was it was a blast. It was fascinating culture. I got to see some of Saudi Arabia, some of Kuwait, so it was a good experience. I've been lucky with my deployments because they've both been awesome. Yeah, they've been an incredible experience that I never thought I'd do. Yeah, nice. It's very fun.
I had a little bit of a Good Morning Vietnam
Yeah.
moment there with all the.
Yeah.
I was hearing Robin Williams in my head. Sorry.
Yeah. The Armed Forces Network is cool, AFN. I saw more of that when I was on my first deployment because for some reason, Sporting Kansas City would always be on AFN, where I was at in Ukraine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then on this last deployment, for whatever reason, it was always wrestling was always on, and that was it in the chow hall where I was at. So
Like WWE.
WWE, yeah.
Yes.
Well, it was WWE, and then it was some of the other leagues as well. Is it like Ring of Honor or something like that?
I don't keep up with it
So-
anymore. I quit watching in the '90s when The Rock and Stone Cold and Goldberg and all those guys stopped wrestling. That's when I quit.
And then sometimes there'd be sports on, but yeah, we I wouldn't say complain, but we were trying to get a little diversity, and you could go to different parts of the chow hall and different stuff would be on. So you could go in one section, get news, one section you could get whatever's on in the middle of the day, and then other sections you could just get sports. So it was pretty well represented, I would say.
So you're going to go to the college in Maryland.
Yeah, it's a 2-month it's a 2-month course. And
Okay.
in the military, it's tough in the Guard and Reserves because you're trying to keep up with your civilian career. You got family, of course, and you've got to knock out these schools to qualify for your job, basically. So if you want to promote or if you want to certify for a job like what I'm doing, you got to figure out how do I fit this in my schedule. And so, I tried to do an online option. I think I'm going to be doing an in-person option, which I think is going to work out better because the online course is real time. So it's maybe not necessarily having to sit there for lectures, but you have to work with other people and finish projects every week, and that's 6 months. So
Yeah, I think in person would be a little easier. So you have a degree in the civilian world, right?
Yeah, I have a degree and a master's degree. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Is it in journalism or is it something else?
I'll be honest with you. So I got into some journalism and film programs at different universities I applied to in California primarily, but I ended up going to USC for undergrad, and I was kind of starstruck. I had no idea how expensive it was until later on in life. But I got rejected. I didn't get into Annenberg, which is the journalism school or the film school. I ended up getting in under political science because you could apply for 3 majors, and then if you got accepted under one, you could go in under that one, and you could try and add some later. So what I ended up doing is taking courses in media and journalism and then adding communications. So I ended up doing political science communication and then doing a couple of shows there because there was what was called the Robert Zemeckis Center, and any student could go and audition for a show there. So you could do a news show, sports show. I did kind of a entertainment type show, and we got all sorts of people on it throughout LA.
Nice.
I mean, I talked to George Lucas, Train, and then all sorts of people in the film industry. It was awesome.
How was George Lucas?
He was cool because he was, of course, a USC alum, and so that was a press junket, and so it's basically a huge circle. Imagine like wagons circling up, it's just all media outlets in a big circle, and he just goes from outlet to outlet to outlet. And we were kind of towards the end, so he was he seemed kind of tired, like, I'm done with this. And he was on the phone. He's like, I'm surrounded by a bunch of media. But he was, but he was cool. Of course, we had to talk Star Wars and his, I only had a few minutes, but he gave us a little more time as well. But yeah, it was a blast. It was cool. It was a cool war story to talk about.
Heck yeah. So that was your undergraduate. What did you get your graduate at?
So I went to Emporia State online because the different states. So what's unique about the Guard is every state is a little bit different. Not only what they specialize in, like one state might be more of an infantry heavy state, one artillery, but also as far as professional development for officers and non-commissioned officers, I feel like Kansas is very big on education, and so to compete as an officer, they encourage you to get a master's if you want to be competitive. And so I ended up going to Emporia State and getting an MBA, which was a great education. It was relatively inexpensive. It was professors from all over the world, students from all over the world. It was definitely pretty tough. I think
online's the way to go if you can swing it.
I've done
all my stuff online, and
if you can, I'd recommend if it was modules. So basically, you have a week to do all the work, and then towards the end, you do your capstone, and then you have to work with other students. But if it's more a program where you can do it on your own time, that's awesome. If you have to be there physically for classes, then you have to make sure that your schedule allows.
I've noticed the bigger universities are still more traditional, even they're online. So I went to Columbia Southern.
Cool.
Got my first bachelor's. Got a second one from Waldorf, and they're the same. And now I'm working on the master's.
Oh, good for you.
But it's 8-week classes. So you have that week to get it done. And then so it's going to take me just over 2 years. I can do it faster, but why?
Right.
Why put more pressure on yourself when you can do one Because
what
the
I do,
undergrad
yeah.
was two every 8 weeks. So it was constantly going back and forth. But the in-person just doesn't work for working people.
Yeah.
Especially, you got
Exactly.
your civilian career, then you got your military career, you got family. I'm assuming you have kids.
Yes. Yeah.
So then their stuff takes up your time, and you're just out of it.
Right.
So I think that's awesome. And did the National Guard pay for your...
Yeah, I ended up using part of my GI Bill, and then the GI Bill I have left over, I'm going to give to my kids.
Perfect.
And then, is what I'm planning on doing. Not everybody has to do that, and there's other way. I mean, if your kids get scholarships, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just did one class at a time. I wasn't in a hurry to get it done.
No.
But it definitely, I think I agree. It for people who work, for people who have families, it's a good option. But you definitely have to be disciplined to get the work done. There's you're not showing up and the teachers are saying, make sure you get your work done. It's all on you.
I'm a last minute guy.
Yeah.
Like my paper was due today. I
Yeah.
just wrote it an hour ago.
we had people like that. Like they'd have like a discussion post due, and they were getting it in like 10 minutes before it was due. I said, man,
I
what if
can't
your
stand
computer
those.
crashed? What if what if your car broke down?
You forgot your charging cord.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I hate those discussion boards because you have to be very careful in what you say,
Right.
because there's no tone. So like you could be replying to a comment, and like if you read it in the wrong tone, you're attacking that person. I'm like, So I've got to make sure I type something in there where, I'm not jumping on you.
Yeah.
It's just
Don't do the all caps.
Yeah,
You got to get
absolutely.
your 2 posts in. Yeah. And then they have this whole etiquette policy that you have to read ahead of time to make sure, you're trying to make sure you have the correct
no
tone.
4-letter words.
Exactly.
But,
Exactly.
But that's the thing with the written word in any form, is the emotion or whatever that's attached to it is completely on who's reading it.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell the person who wrote it what they were feeling at the time, and you
so-
can infer, but
Knock on wood, I haven't had any issues.
That's right.
Yeah.
yet.
It's like we can both look at it like a piece of artwork and we see completely different things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Is you never know what the intention was of who wrote it, but you can interpret it different ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
So do you think that your civilian career helped with what you're doing in the military now? Is that why they picked you before you went to that school? Because you have a background, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I got into public affairs. I started out in infantry. I originally joined in my later 20s. I'd already gone to college. It was just something I wanted to do. And then I mentioned how each state kind of has a specialty. So you can do pretty much, whatever you want, but some states you might have more slots, for example, in a certain branch. So I was in Oklahoma at the time with the 45th when I first joined, and they're big on artillery and infantry. And so I initially joined infantry. And then those are type A folks. They're very competitive and fit and type A. It's definitely a very competitive culture. But I mentioned you get your what's called a functional area, and so for me, I luckily the sergeant major I worked for on this last deployment, he either watched me or knew who I was, and it was a huge opportunity to be able to do what I did. I was away from the flagpole, meaning not at the headquarters with the generals and everybody else. There's only about 40 of us for our little headquarters element on this base, and then there were other units too, and each unit had a different specialty. So you had like units doing security forces who are protecting the base. You had the military police, you had medical, you had logistics, and then you had contractors, and so it was pretty complex operation. And then you had UN agencies there as well, with people from all over the world. But I lucked out in being able to get that gig, and then through my civilian job. So our division public affairs officer, he lives here in town, and we had met through my civilian career a couple of years ago when he was working for one of the big law firms here, and then he was also commander in the Kansas Army National Guard, and it was just a segment really to try and promote the Guard and talk about how hey, here's somebody who's very high up and 2 careers, and he's making it happen, which is difficult, but I don't think that always gets promoted a lot. You just see the commercials and that's about it. Yeah. And I will say on the commercials, it talks about the stateside missions, but remember you can go overseas too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just something to keep in mind. After 9/11, the Guard and Reserve, they get deployed a lot, especially when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. Really, they started utilizing the Reserve and Guard units to sustain and to support active duty.
Yeah. Well, those were huge operations, and just from a
Right.
sheer logistical standpoint, the number of people you need,
Yeah.
you got to have them.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. But yeah, it's been great. I mean, just the diversity of people you have in the Guard, all different professions, all walks of life, a lot of people. We had a lot of first responders, and they had incredible value, especially with military police a lot. And so you have different way of problem solving and critical thinking, because you have all these, you have doctors, lawyers, business owners, first responders, and they bring different skill sets to the organization, and they use that to help in whatever the mission is. So I've found it to be incredibly efficient and important and value added when you have the Guard working overseas and reserves too.
So you mean putting the right people in the right position to get the job done?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times,
what a novel idea.
Oh, that's
a little taboo there, man.
Call it the right seat on the bus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, making sure you have the right person in the right seat. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And it's not always that people will do exactly in the Guard or Reserves what they do on the civilian side. Sometimes people do things completely different just to switch it up. Mm-hmm. Like they say they don't want to go and for a weekend or 2 weeks or months or a deployment to do the same thing they do on the civilian side. But in my case, it ended up working out well, just because I kind of already had that credibility and experience, and one of the best parts about it was having a general ask me what I think, and I said, oh man, I must be either doing something right, or I must be faking it good enough to where he care what I think, right?
He take his stars off first before he answers it.
right, yeah, disclaimer, waiver, yeah. So that was real cool, and there's a lot of similarities in really understanding the media and what they're looking for. I'm able to really kind of work with them very well, and things sync up real good, because I understand what they're going through, what they need.
That's the one thing I always liked about the military was, like, you're get ready to go to this school, mm-hmm. so you're taking classes that pertain to your job mm-hmm. to promote.
Right.
I thinking that would be a great transition to the civilian world if companies did that, and police and fire departments, EMS departments, every agency we have, like even at the state level, to where we prepare you before you go into that next role.
Right.
Instead of, hey, here's your role, good luck.
Exactly.
And then you got to learn the hard way, because
you're
going to make mistakes. And I learned better with hard lessons, mm-hmm. but I think having the background first would make those hard lessons a lot softer.
Oh, yeah. That goes under that leadership principle of you set your people up for success.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And if you are trying to put the best product out, no matter what you're doing, whether that be, fire service or making, straws, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. Whenever you're getting people that are climbing up the ladder, you want them to be good at their job, be proficient. Yeah. You don't mm-hmm. want to say, okay, I'm going to promote Chris, and then we're going to spend 6 months of him just making mistakes that are easily avoidable if we just show him that slot X goes with tab B,
right,
instead of having him try to figure it out,
right,
and hiding tab B from him for a month of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think one of the most important parts of leadership is taking care of your people, and that means exactly that, is making sure you're setting them up for success and making sure that they're trained and they have the right schooling for the job they're doing. And some of my mentors, and I think everybody should have mentors, they'll sit you down and you can tell them where you want to be, and they'll help you get there. But otherwise, if somebody isn't competent, it doesn't mean they're not good enough to do the job. It just means that they weren't put in the right position, or it means that they didn't have everybody checking up on them to make sure their schools were done. And that's what our commanding general told us, is that the reason he's a 2-star general is because he got his schools done on time. Because I mentioned in the Guard, it's on you. Only person in charge of your career is you, we say mm-hmm. a lot.
Yeah.
And so when the time came to promote, a lot of his friends, he said, who were way better than he was, didn't have them done. And so that's why he was able to move up the ladder. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah. And that's, like, for example, I've got one phase left of what's called Captain's Career Course. And that's where, as a captain or as a lieutenant, you take whatever your branch is, you go through that career course. So for me, it's maneuver. So it's infantry and armor. It's at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I'm going to finish my last phase next month, which is good because I'm coming up on 4 years as a captain. So the guys who and ladies who do that as lieutenants, I think that's real smart. That's what I should have done. But I just was working on the masters and wasn't really thinking about it, and kind of pushed it off. So that was kind of me learning things the hard way. but absolutely, yeah. I think it's important because a lot of things in the military I've learned through leaders, I've learned by asking, but things don't always come directly to you. I didn't even know to commission as an officer, I didn't have to enlist first. I could have just gone. There's a program in the Guard where you can basically go. You go to basic, and then you go straight to Officer Candidate School. But I did time in a line unit. And then I remember first day of basic training, Fort Benning, Georgia. I was at E4 because if you have a college degree in the Army, you can actually start out with a little bit of rank. It's kind of controversial, I guess, because some people don't like that because they think you should start as a private, which I can see that. But yeah, the commander of this company comes up and he was asking me, "You go to college?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, aren't you going to OCS?" He said, "Oh, well, I was told I have to enlist first." He's like, "Oh my Lord." Recruiter. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Those guys are back high-fiving each other. Yeah. You got another one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dude, but that goes back to what we've talked about several times, is that knowledge gap.
Yeah.
Of you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And especially if you're going into something that nobody around you knows about, you go in blind and you make those mistakes of, I could have went, OCS first instead of enlisting, or, there's programs in the military, there's programs for first responders, police and all that stuff of, these things that can help you like buy a house or do this or do that. Right. And nobody knows about them.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. This last deployment, I had no idea. I mentioned I was giving some of the GI Bill to my kids, so I thought you could just do a couple of years or even do 20 or more and retire and just give it to them. It doesn't work that way, and I never knew this. There was a sergeant major who told this to me. So basically, you have to do 4 years to be able to transfer the benefits. So that means, say you're going to do 20 years. Well, at you're 16, that's the latest you can do those 4 years. And I had no idea. You just go in this database and you check, you have to apply for it. And then it's an incentive, so you owe them time. But I never knew anything about that. Yeah. And then overseas, there's what's called the savings deposit program. So you can put up to $10,000 into a savings account and you get 10% interest. It's if you need to park some money somewhere. But it's not really that well advertised. So there's a lot of things. And just because, in the Guard, it's kind of like you work remotely and then you meet together for a weekend, and there's so much you try and stuff into a couple of days that you might just kind of very briefly, very quickly do briefings, and people are busy and people are there and then they have to leave. And so some stuff just gets lost in the sauce, I think, with benefits like that.
Anytime you look at any government entity, all you're going to get is red tape.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to navigate unless somebody's already been there.
Yeah.
Which all it does is a disservice to the members who could use something.
Right.
Yeah. It would make stuff a lot easier. Like even like the retirement process.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, well, who do I need to talk to? Okay, you got to go talk to this person and then this person, and then, you got to fill out this piece of paperwork, and then you got to decide about this, and then there's so many, rumors, because that's reliable information of, well, no, if you do this, then you can't ever do that. Well, come to find out, well, that's not true. You can do this or that or whatever. And yeah, dude, it's that knowledge gap thing of just, and it's not that it's not accessible. It's just nobody's pushing it and making it like putting it at the forefront. And a lot of people don't think about that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, just going back to taking care of your people, that's what I try and do as much as I possibly can, is if there's something that they need to do or benefit the troops, benefit whoever your subordinates are, is let them know about it, tell them about it. But yeah, you're right. There definitely is that knowledge gap that exists, and I've learned you got to be proactive, and in the military you have field manuals and you have doctrine, but a big part of what I try and do is you be creative. You understand the box, but then you think outside the box. And I used to be a plans officer, and you spend all this time and effort coming up with the perfect plan, but then as the bullets start flying, it just goes all out the window. Like they say, the enemy has a vote. Yeah. So I just say
it goes back to the Mike Tyson quote for me.
Yeah, exactly. He said, "Has a plan until you get punched in the face." Yeah. I say bad plan violently executed. That's what I try and do.
Just shoot more.
Yeah. Yeah. You just go back to training and SOPs, and sometimes it's sloppy, but you just get it done. But
a win's a win.
Yeah.
It had to be pretty.
Yeah.
Well, but that also is something we were talking about earlier, like that's a very true thing of training. So like you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall back to the level of your training. So whatever you spent the most time on, that's what you're going to get.
Exactly.
So if you spent the most time sitting on your ass, then you're going to sit on your ass.
Yeah. And that's something, yeah, I would imagine. I mean, as first responders or military, I mean, yeah, the more you train versus, just sitting around, that'll pay off. It'll absolutely, it'll absolutely come in handy when it counts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I mean, you talk about the first responder world, like you can talk about being a firefighter. You know, I mean, we had it. Our old captain, we'd go into a house and he would throw the hose line around like it was nothing. Now, he was a bigger guy and whatever, but also he had a lot of time on and knew how to manipulate the hose where he wasn't putting out a whole lot of energy. But he knew that stuff. And it wasn't until he showed me in particular of how to do certain things and I'm like, oh, okay. Now I'm not going to be falling down so tired after every one. Now I know how to move this thing without using all of my energy and just wearing myself out real fast for no reason.
Yeah, definitely always pick up neat tips and tricks, and we call it shooter's preference, and how you set things up on your kid as you kind of learn that as you go along, and you do what works for you. But that's awesome. Yeah, because there's the way you train the standard, as they say, but then you kind of pick up what works for you the best, and certain guys have different preferences on how they do things, but it's always great to learn from others. But
you're always going to pick up something
from
from them.
Exactly.
And adapt it for you.
Yeah.
So kind of like when when you went in and you were an E4, even though you could have gone to officer candidate school, this is my opinion. I think it's better that you went in as an enlisted because now you understand the mindset there and what they're looking for from an officer, and I think that helps you be a better leader. Goes back to that servant leadership we've talked about here before.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in servant leadership. Absolutely, is that and I've talked to like JROTC cadets before and given talks, and that's what I always say is that servant leadership. It's you don't want to think of them like they're working for me. I'm working for them, and I'm earning their trust and their respect. But just going back to competence, and best leaders I've had knew their stuff. And they led from the front, and it wasn't just some cliche or just some type of just some type of memorized doctrine. It was they were taking care of their people and fighting for their people too. Because I mean, leadership it's not when you're well rested and well fed. It's when you're hungry and everybody's tired, everybody's upset, and it's how you motivate them to get the job done. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure first responders, I'm sure you've had days where you don't sleep much, and I mean, you're busy and you got to get everybody motivated and lives are on the line. So, I mean, that goes back to competence, trust, respect.
That's why all the hospitals have the little EMS room.
Oh, yeah.
Where you can get little snacks to make you.
That way
you're not grouchy when you walk in and yell at a nurse.
Exactly. Yeah, that's awesome.
Just because you walk out with a basket of food doesn't mean nothing.
Yeah.
You got other people you got to feed at the station. They're hungry too. Out running calls.
But I mean, with servant leadership, I'd imagine you start out and you've got to wash the trucks, right, and roll up the hoses But I would imagine that the guys and ladies who volunteer for that and don't complain are probably the ones who maybe start to earn that respect and trust. Because you got to prove yourself, right? Because you're joining a team that depends on you for their life, right?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the culture that kind of gets overlooked, and I don't want to say that it's going away or it's more rare than it used to be, but that whole earning your place and paying your dues and doing all those things is kind of less than it used to be, but I don't think it's any less important. Yeah. And, doing that stuff and going through those things whenever you get to the other side of it and you're in a formal leadership position, because I like to talk about leadership at all levels. The senior firefighter on the rig is in charge of the firefighters. At least it's not formal, but it's, you're expecting them to know their job and to be able to help mentor the younger people that you have and do some of the rudimentary training and the basics, and it just keeps their skills sharp too. And then once you move up to the driver position and the captain position and the chief position, your responsibilities grow exponentially with each promotion. But it's more valuable, I think, to have done the job at the lowest level before you get to that high level, and then because you understand what's going on at that level. So the decisions that you make from up here, how it's going to affect those people.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I did earn some respect, and I understand the lower enlisted and their needs and wants and desires and what they look for in a good leader. and what it's going to take to motivate them and follow them. Because when I was a platoon leader, you're standing in front of 40 people, and some of them were combat veterans. And the unit I was in had just got back from Afghanistan, and they had, I think, 14 casualties between the 2 battalions total. But now you have to lead these guys, and they expect you to know what you're doing and be competent and be a good leader, lead from the front. But you got to prove it, and then continuously prove it too. It's kind of like sports. It's all, what have you done for me lately? I mean, if you stop performing, if you're an all-star the year before, but then you're not perforing anymore. That's it, right?
Yeah. Well, and they're always watching.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody's trying to get your job.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And all it takes is that one mistake, and then it's like, oh, that guy. Yeah. Oh, I can't believe we got to deal with him again.
Exactly. Yeah. But some of the best leaders I've seen, I mean, they, no matter what the rank is, they still are up there in the trenches. I remember I went to the Tommy Franks Museum in Hobart, Oklahoma, I believe it was. So he was the CENTCOM, or Central Command commander. So he was in charge of the initial Iraq and Afghanistan invasion. And the executive director of his museum was given our candidate class a little talk about leadership. And he said that what he respected about Tommy Franks is he had seen him with presidents and leaders of nations and kings, and then he saw him with the museum janitor. And he said, you know what? He treated both the same. Yeah. And so I think humility comes along with servant leadership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's just so many stories of leaders I've seen. I mean, one of my favorite battalion commander would get the phone numbers of not just every soldier in the battalion, but their spouses too, or significant other, and he would call them on their birthday and tell them a happy birthday. And for the significant other, he'd tell them happy birthday and thank them for their support, especially when their loved one's gone, when they're on deployments, because the families serve too. Yeah, and they got to cover down. And that same battalion commander, when we were at Fort Riley, where it was an armor unit, so that's where tanks were, and he had a little commander suite with him and the sergeant major, so it was just kind of like a little apartment in our operations center, our tactical operations center talk. And he would sweep out his own room, clean his own bathroom, scrub his own toilet, and he would not let anybody do it for him. Mm-hmm. And then I mentioned my first deployment to Ukraine. We had a change of command ceremony. Whenever you have an incoming commander, they usually say something. So the commander who the incoming commander was talking about one of the leaders he looked up to on that Afghanistan deployment, because he said this was a commander who he was always ordering men and women in harm's way, and that was personal for him. And even though he was in charge of hundreds of people, and so once in a while, if you're the boss, you can pretty much do what you want, right? So he would go on combat missions, on patrols and one of the patrols, the unit was attacked, and so this commander, he was a colonel, he ran under fire to a soldier who had been shot, and then he grabbed him and threw him over his shoulder, and then firemen carried him all the way back to where the Humvees were, threw him in, and they were able to save his life. And then that soldier named his son after that colonel. And so the commander said that's the type of servant leadership to where this wasn't for show or awards. It was because of what had to be done at that time. But that commander was there on the ground, and he was present and did what had to be done to save a life. Yeah,
and didn't say, "Hey, go get that guy."
Yeah, and it's not just combat. I mean, in my civilian job, all the different careers I've been in and jobs I've been in, you have leaders who are more present and leaders to where you have no idea where they were. Like was it like Band of Brothers? Was it the lieutenant who they never knew where he was? You remember that? He said like I got a meeting or something. Yeah.
So, I'll be a battalion headquarters.
Yeah, I mean even if it's I believe it's called leadership by walking around, which is fine because that's where leaders will budget time to go and talk to their subordinates, their employees, their team members, and I've seen that. And then an example, then when I was at Fort Benning for the career course I mentioned for phase 2 or phase 1 in January, one of the seminars we're at, the chaplain told a story about a Black Hawk unit in Iraq, and they were in charge of air support for this big chunk of Iraq area operations, but out of all the Apaches they had, I think they only had 2 working Apaches, and the rest of them were down, so they couldn't provide air support to everybody who needed it. So what the commander did is he had his mechanics work something like 48, 72 hours straight, but the why is a big concept. I mean, Simon Sinek talks about it a lot. A lot is not just the what, but the why. Mm-hmm. And so he said the why is because American and Afghan lives are at stake. To where if we don't fix these Apaches, we can't save lives. and that's why it's important. But not only that is he stayed with these guys and he helped them the entire time. And he didn't really know, he wasn't a mechanic, but the point is he was there in the trenches while they were going through this and doing whatever he could to help them get through this. And that's what I would say is servant leadership.
Yeah. And that means a lot.
Yeah.
It does.
Absolutely. It's just showing up and knowing your people, knowing what motivates them, knowing about their families, remembering their kids' names. I think that goes a long way. And that's something I think you can do in any profession. That's just how to take care of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion. And being genuine about it, not being fake. You know what I mean? Because people can tell. I mean, soldiers can tell when you're being fake. I've seen it. And they're smart. And they, if they understand the intent or what we call commander's intent, what needs to get done, then they'll figure it out. They're very creative. I mean, we have been in desert conditions and terrible conditions with Oklahoma weather, and they figure out how to make it as comfortable as possible. And I mean, I was in Ukraine, and for the barracks, it was just a big, huge open room. So they built their own little apartments out of plywood with doors, and then they got these 2-gallon jugs of water with 550 cord, and they made these automatic pulleys to where they basically made their own automatic door. So when you so this 550 cord, it would close the door and go, and then it would just go. It was the coolest thing. Yeah, but the point is they did that themselves.
Yeah,
the troops.
Ingenuity, man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Ain't stupid if it works.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about kind of like everybody's seen Saving Private Ryan, and you saw Omaha Beach, which is realistic, but you had just a small band of guys led by a captain and his sergeant who got it done. And you saw how ugly it was and messy it was, but they figured out where they were and they knew what had to be done. And so, yeah, that's something they show a lot in military schools is trying to figure out, knowing what the mission is, knowing what they're supposed to do, and everybody was mixed up and confused, and at one point they didn't know where they were trying to figure out where they were, but the point is they got it done. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the value of knowing the mission.
Yep.
And knowing what your end goal is.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it might be a little bit messy and you might take a misstep or two, but you know what the end goal is and you're moving in that direction.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've kind of talked about it. It seems like things are kind of falling off.
Right.
Not to go all like whatever, but I mean, I would say that's kind of how our country is right now. We don't really have a mission or a goal. Right. It's just kind of
Yeah. I mean, you talk a lot about command philosophies in the military, and as a commander, I don't want it to just be another memo on the wall that nobody reads. I mean, it's something that I talk about a lot, which for mine it's excellence, integrity, and honor. But it's something that I try and execute and live, not just say. Meaning excellence, if I tell the troops I need them to do their best, and then here I am not even showing up and not caring, then I'm obviously not giving it 100%. And then integrity, if I'm telling them, hey, I want you to, if I'm not doing the right thing, but I expect them to do the right thing, then I really have no integrity. Yeah. And then honor is just something, I mean, like when you put on your uniforms, I mean, it represents something bigger than yourself. It represents people who have served before you, and people who have given their lives in service of the community or the country for complete strangers, right? So when you think about that concept, and it's kind of nostalgic, but it's something that I take seriously. I know you guys do as well. Then you represent that. So in a way, you're representing the military or police or fire or first responders in everything you do, and wherever you are. And so if you could be in another state or another country, and if you tell them you're first responder in the United States, then you're representing that organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I think it's important to take seriously.
Yeah, very important.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So how did you get hooked up with the with the nonprofits?
What's interesting is I moved here from Oklahoma City, I'm going to mention, and it's a little bit smaller city, but I don't remember there being many nonprofits that serve veterans and first responders. And so when I got here, through work, I kind of naturally gravitated towards it. And once people kind of saw the passion I bring towards veteran and first responder topics and issues and stories and content, then they kind of started to bring me stories as well. And so what I really like is you have say the VA, for example, is awesome, but I think all of the different veteran service organizations, and a lot of them also serve first responders as well, as I think each one is important because it has what we call a subject matter expertise, or it has a specific niche. Anyway,
that word.
They're experts in something, and so I really like that, and I what I try and do is not just MC events, but just try and shed a light on the organization or fundraising efforts, because the need continues to grow, of course, and then they need funding to continue their missions. But what I really like is, I mean, you have equine assisted therapy, you've got organizations that try and get older veterans out of their house to events and positive types of events. You have organizations that do retreats that help veterans heal holistic, and first responders who are dealing with trauma to be able to deal with it in a healthy way, in a healthy environment. They learn holistic healing methods, and they learn how to be able to deal with the trauma that they've seen, and a lot of these concepts I think will work for those who aren't even in, say, the first responder or the military service. I mean, you can have trauma being in a car wreck, right? But there's just ways to quantify it, to get it out, to deal with it, and you learn fitness and nutrition and things to keep yourself healthy. But once I learned about all these different organizations and how a lot of them will partner or work with each other, because it's one team, one fight, as we say in the military. I don't think there necessarily needs to be rivalries. It can be a collaborative effort.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I guess, I mean, you have rivalries and things,
well,
but it's healthy rivalries.
Yeah.
But yeah, once I learned about all of these organizations that exist, it became my goal to try and do what I could with the microphone I have to shed a light on the work they're doing. So whether that's charity events or specific events or just the mission, and I've done segments on a lot of them. Almost all of them that I can think of, and they're all doing great work and they're passionate about it. But I think we're really blessed in this city, though, in Kansas City, to have so many great organizations and chapters of national organizations too. Are here, and not just for veteran and first responder, but for other organizations or like causes with kids and kids like living with disabilities. I mean, we've got just a lot of great organizations that work on finding cures for cancer, and so So if anybody out there has a passion about something specific, that maybe they have a personal story, there's probably an organization in the city that's their mission. So I'd encourage people to seek that out. We're real lucky in that regard.
I wonder, and this kind of struck me, I wonder why Kansas City? Is it because it's in the middle of the country, or is it because it's that, like, you hear about Midwest hospitality and that kind of thing? I wonder if that has something to do with it and play into that.
I've wondered the same thing, and I'm not sure if you have, say, a certain metric on if you're in a bigger city, you'd expect to see X amount of organizations, or in Kansas City, is there too many, is there not enough? But I definitely know that, you've got the Midwestern hospitality, and I know, at least for the military side of it, a lot of people in the military don't really have a home. They've just moved from town to town, so sorry.
Kidding. Take a drink of water, man.
Take a drink of water. Is this live?
No, it is not live. It's recorded.
Just kidding.
I tell you,
so before I choked on myself, I was just saying that in the military, a lot of people will usually, home for them when they retire will be wherever they're at. So a lot of people go to Fort Leavenworth, which has the Command General Staff College, which is, it's kind of like a master, it's like kind of like grad school for the military. But anyway, so for the military aspect of it, you've got that, and then you have what's called the SAMS, the School for Advanced Military Studies, and that's like, I guess, doctorate level. I'm not sure. I mean, that's pretty high speed to go there. But a lot of people will retire to there. You've got Fort Riley, and then you have a lot of, I think, people with Midwestern values appreciate service, and a lot of people in the Midwest join the military, so maybe they just come home. As a matter of fact, this last school I just went to, my instructor was from Overland Park. He was an active duty Army guy. And I think he said he might be coming back home. He's not going to do 20 years, but he, his mom's on the Chamber of Commerce locally, I believe, for Kansas City. But anyway, so that might be a reason. And I think just good people just want to do good things. But it'd be interesting to kind of compare it to other similar sized cities. But I can say, with Oklahoma City, there are great organizations there as well. I just don't feel like there are quite as many, but I could be completely wrong. That's just kind of what I noticed. Yeah.
I don't think there's ever enough, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and they're all strapped, like you said, with fundraising and personnel, to run them. And the need and demand for them is growing exponentially every year. And, I mean, they just can't keep up.
Yeah, inflation's not helping these days
Yeah,
either.
no,
You know what
it's
I mean?
not.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in if you just have a organization that's a handful of guys and ladies running out of the garage, but they can help just one person, I think it's absolutely worth it. And I know, but yeah, fundraising is tough, and then I know that you might have all these different organizations asking you for your money and you want to give to all of them, but maybe you have a limited, you can only give so much. So it's definitely tough, but then you can also always do in-kind donations. I try and showcase different organizations and help them in any way I can. But yeah, a lot of them take volunteers. There's other ways you can donate aside from just monetarily. But yeah, that's a good point. I always wonder that too. And I think there's an organization, I think it's called, is it Nonprofit Connect? I think it's an organization that is a nonprofit you can sign up for or register, and it brings all of these organizations together, not just to network with each other, but also you learn about the nonprofit sector. So you learn about grant writing, which is a big deal. I mean, people do that professionally.
Yeah.
And
that's tough.
It is, a lot of paperwork, right? That's what my understanding. But and so they'll have workshops and seminars, things like that. And then I mentioned sometimes you'll have organizations banding together, and we saw that a lot during COVID. Like there's also, kind of completely off topic, but there's a lot of great breweries in town. And I remember when they all banded together during COVID, when nobody could go out of their house, and they had like a drive-through type of event to where you could drive through and get whatever you want from all sorts of different breweries as well. And by the way, there's some good first responder veteran themed breweries that you probably heard about as well. Yeah. So that's definitely, it's interesting. But yeah, I'd say they're all awesome and support them all. And I remember talking to the VFW and I'm trying to remember if I asked the question or if this is one of their vice presidents, I think, for communications there, and which is awesome. We have the VFW, the national VFW headquarters here in Kansas City, and he was talking about how, as far as veteran service organizations or first responder organizations, he said, just join them all. Work with all of them. It doesn't have to be just do one or just do a couple. Yeah, if you have that type of time, I would just make the time. Yeah,
retirement.
Yeah.
Give you a purpose when you retire.
Yeah. That's what I'm going to do when I retire. I'll just be part of all the organizations. Like I volunteered at the VA for a while and kind of before I started getting hot and heavy with grad school. And that was awesome because sometimes people just want somebody to talk to. And so I just sit up there at the info desk with another veteran, and veterans would come up and they'd talk to us for about 20 minutes about this, that, and the other. And afterwards they would thank us because we just listened to them, and that's free.
Yeah. Well, and then sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
We talk about mental health on this podcast a ton.
Yeah.
That's kind of the purpose of it,
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that often gets overlooked is having somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
Because we all know about wait times to get in to see a counselor or a therapist or to get into a program or whatever. And then sometimes it might not even be to that level anyway. You may just need somebody to talk to, and you don't have anybody because, like you said, you were in the military at Fort Leavenworth, and then whenever you got out, you just stayed.
Yeah.
Well, you're not really attached to the military anymore. You don't have any family here. You may not have any friends here.
Yeah.
Who do you have to talk to?
Yeah. And that, it's like, I don't know if I can plug it, but our friend, Rob Sanderson as well.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about keeping your bucket full and being able to have your cup runneth over, as the Bible says. So being able to have your bucket full so you can pour into other people. But you're right. And that's what's tough about the National Guard and Reserve is if like say you have a firehouse, a police station, you're all together, or if you have like an active duty base, the families are there or they're in the area. But with the Guard and Reserves as well, people live all over. Nobody. We see each other once in a while, but you don't always have somebody there to talk to. You don't have the chaplain there to talk to as well. And so it's tough, but sometimes, the best thing you can do, I think, is listening. But I appreciate, and I'm a fan of the podcast, as you know, and I appreciate all you do to talk about mental health, because it's tough, especially us type A's. I mean, that's the thing about leadership is you can't, as you as a commander, I can't be weak in front of my guys, right? I can't cry in front of my guys. You know what I mean? So
demotion,
exactly. They'll say, that guy's a weenie. Yeah,
easy on the language,
exactly.
Rob. I mean,
sorry,
come on.
Sorry, is this a family show or is this R-rated? So whatever it takes to, I believe it's called talk therapy, or at least just talking about things. And I'm sure you guys talk about trauma and about how it can be 10 years after something happens to where it surfaces. And you could even see that in relationships, trauma that happened a long time ago will surface years later.
Yep.
And so, and so going back to these organizations in town, I mean, if you like to surf, you got Rob's Charity, you've got great resources with podcasts like the content you guys talk about, and the SMEs, we call them, the subject matter experts you bring on your show. But I mean, we mentioned you like horses, you've got equine assisted therapy in town, you got organizations to do that. Organizations that will just get people together in good positive environments. So, but we mentioned about being proactive, like about your career, but you've got to, seek out those resources and just be able to have the humility to say, I need help, And
well, for a type A personality,
exactly,
that's
it can be
hard things.
It can be tough. Yeah, it can be really tough because you feel like, okay, I'm a failure or I'm doing something wrong. But I mean, you can't help others if your bucket's empty. Yeah. But and mental health it's such a huge thing. I went on a ride along with, let's say, one of the local departments, and there was a tough call, and then they didn't really have time to process it before immediately going to the next call. And I'm sure it's the same thing with fire too. You can have a traumatic call, the stuff you guys see and deal with, and then you immediately have to go to the next call and be on your A game, right? Because somebody else whose life is in jeopardy needs your help, right?
Yep.
So when you have time to, and I'm sure I know you talk about this on your show, but you have to have time to de-stress and process that, and that's not easy. I mean, it's easier said. So whatever your therapy of choice is, not just, definitely talk about it, but some people like to, you like to golf, you like to surf if you can get out to the beach, of course. I know the beaches are awesome here, of course, but you know what I mean?
It is a hotbed of surfing.
Exactly, yeah. But there's organizations in town. I know people in town who they got into art, for example, and they were at a dark time in their life when they started, and the artwork reflected that, and then it eventually got lighter as they went through their process of healing and discovery and transformation. So I forgot to mention there's organizations where you can golf, you can do art, music. We already mentioned other organizations. So yeah, it's great you guys address it because it's a tough topic. I don't think everybody always wants to talk about mental health, right? It's taboo. Right?
Yeah. People don't want to talk about it. That's for sure. But that's part of the culture and the stigma. That needs to change, and it is changing slowly. Getting more people on board and talking about it, realizing the importance of it. Because for the long time it's okay, we got to let nothing bother us. Got to be professional, because it is, like you said, you can go to a severely jacked up traumatic call and then you leave there and go to another severely jacked up, and you just start stacking all these things. Well, if you're the type of person that stuff doesn't bother, there's a word for that. It's called psychopath.
I was gonna say crazy. Yeah.
So, any sane, normal person is going to be affected by the work that we do and the things that we see. You gotta have a way to deal with it. And it's true. You might go from one to the next, but eventually you will get back to the station, or you will be off duty. And if it takes, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is, to the time when you can get to a point where you can stop, slow down, process it, do it. And do it immediately. And then that way you don't get that stuff hanging on, because that's how PTSD develops. Is the more that you let that stuff go, and the longer and longer you let it go, the worse and worse it's going to get, and the harder it's going to be to get over that hump. If you do it immediately, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done the honor flight. If you've ever heard of that, we have some great organizations here in town, and they exist throughout the country to where they take. Unfortunately, not too many World War II veterans now, as you know, but now you got like Korea and Vietnam, and so they take them to D.C. to see the memorials in their honor. But talking to some of these World War II veterans, you talk about trauma. I mean, they can remember what they had for breakfast like 60 years ago because it's that vivid, and I'm sure it's similar with those calls. And of course, I'm not an expert, but I don't know if that ever goes away, but you learn to deal with it and manage it. Like I know guys who they were in Iraq and they might smell diesel fuel, and that's that trigger, that will trigger that trauma, but they learn breathing techniques, which is other things you can learn, and they learn how to deal with it. And that's a good, I think, principle for anybody who's gone through trauma is to talk to somebody about it, to express themselves, because when you bottle it all up, you're right, that's where it gets bad. Yeah.
Well, and you're most likely you're never going to forget the incident, but what you can do with therapy and all of those techniques is the emotion that's attached to the incident, you can kind of pull that away.
Yeah.
And it's just a memory. It's not a memory that makes you curl up in a ball on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, and there's healthy ways and unhealthy ways to deal with it. I'm sure we know.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, with this last military school I went to, I let everybody down. I didn't get honor grad. No, I'm just kidding. That's my ego talking. But I volunteered to be the executive officer.
Then why are you on this podcast?
Exactly. I just bring that up because the guy who did get honor grad, who I think I averaged like an 89, this guy got like a 98. But if you get honor grad, you get to talk to the graduates for a couple minutes, and he talked about how halfway to being a good leader or just a leader is showing up, right? We talked about leaders who don't show up and caring about your people. So what I would imagine when you're in as a first responder, you can't make somebody care. That's what the battalion commander I worked for on this last deployment, they pulled me aside before I left to train the next unit because I left a little early. And they said the best thing they liked about me is I cared, and you can't make somebody care, right?
No.
And so I would imagine you go on these calls and you've got the information, logistical information, where you're going. Maybe you have a limited information, I would imagine. Just like in the military, when you start a mission, you don't always have you just know we're going to go on a mission. You have a little bit of information, so you start getting ready.
Yeah, but, just imagine that the information we get from dispatch is what... probably a step below Army intelligence.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. They sometimes they say that's an oxymoron, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, it's tough. Speaking of intelligence, our S2, which is our intelligence officer, who I worked with overseas, got real close to. He had worked in local law enforcement here, and then he eventually got into federal intelligence. And he said the same thing about how it's very, very difficult, it's dangerous, and but kind of the point I was getting at is since you care about what you're doing, you care about these people you're helping. They're not maybe just some random patient, right? They're a human being, and especially dealing with kids. I mean, I can't imagine. So it's important to talk about ways to be able to process that, and like you said, quickly, not letting it linger, because if you do, like I was saying, I've talked to these World War II guys, and there's a lot of reasons why it was different. I mean, back then, I think it was like a quarter of the country was in uniform, and then a huge percentage was working in factories, and so it was very similar to just today. I talked to a guy at we have our new KCI terminal that opened, end of February, and this guy is from here, but he lives in Tel Aviv, Israel now. And what's unique about Israel's military is everybody, my understanding is this is mandatory service.
Yeah.
So everybody serves, and you might not be able to force somebody to be patriotic. I mean, there's some people in the military, maybe first responders, isn't a good fit, so they try it and do something else.
Yeah.
But the point is, since everybody serves, everybody gets it, versus in the U.S., I mean, you have less than 1% serving, and you come back, and then you're immediately thrown back into society. And it's not like ancient cultures to where when the warriors got back from war, they would go out with the elders, and they would kind of decompress, and they would have mentors with them to guide them.
Yeah.
But it's tough, especially in reserves and guard, because you come back from doing this awesome mission. I don't mean like a high-speed combat mission they make movies about. I mean, that's not what I've done.
Hey,
but you know what I mean?
don't sell yourself short.
All right, they're not. But the point is, you come back and it was tough for me. I'll be honest, because I mean, I was somebody overseas. I mentioned that general was asking me what I think. I was working with all sorts of people, and I come back, you know, and I'm not saying I wasn't happy to be home. Obviously, I was, but it's an adjustment.
Yeah.
And so and I don't know how you guys would do that. I mean, so you're on a stressful call, and then you go to another call, and then it builds up, and then you got to go home and be present for your family when you just saw horrific stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That's got to be an adjustment in itself, just from going from work to go home, right?
Yeah.
I take a nap.
You take a nap? Do you?
Yeah, that is one of the hard things, and I mean, you know, my wife Rachel and I, we talk about that. She's like, you've been at the station too long. Yeah. Because I mean, you are different whenever you come home. Because I mean, it's almost like a different it is a different culture, but it's a different life. You know, like you are. I don't want to say you're somebody else while you're there, but you're focused on a task and you have a mission, and this is what you're doing. And then whenever you come home, it's a different mission and it's a different set of tasks.
Right.
And you've got to be able to switch and pivot.
Right.
So, and you can't carry one over into the other. It's like, you know anything about motorcycles?
A little bit.
So you know what an enduro is, right? Okay. So it's a half street bike, half dirt bike. It does both of them really shitty. So that's what you get whenever you're trying to, well, I'm at work, but I got to deal with all the stuff at home, or then I'm at home, but I'm still dealing with all the stuff at work. You know, you got to be able to focus on each task. Because they both are important. You know, your home life is more important or just as important than your work life. You know, you want people to be committed in the first responder realm. You know, you want them to care about their job and be present while they're there. But at the same time, that's just your job and your career. You know, your family, the life outside of your career, that's what's going to carry on. Because you might be a firefighter or a cop for 25 years or 30 years or whatever. Okay, well, what about the 60 other years of your life that you have to live?
That's exactly what our commanding general told us, either before we left or when we got back home, or maybe it was when we were out there, but that's what he said. Actually, it was when we were out there, yeah. He was saying, because we ran a program where I mentioned earlier UPAR, which is every company has one. A company's about roughly 100, 120 people, but they're basically sending us pictures of what the unit's doing. So the general came to talk to, we would train these task forces, which were throughout the entire area of operations. And he talked about that when he came and talked to our students, is the importance of connecting with your family. And some guys he'll talk to, like, yeah, they talked to their family 3 months ago. He said, that's not going to fly. That's not, you know, he said, you've got to make sure you're checking in with them, because like you said, they're the ones who are going to be there when you get home. And when you're out of uniform, they're the ones who are going to be there. So you definitely have to check in with them and got to make sure that they're doing okay.
Are you okay?
I'm tired.
You're talking about a nap.
Yeah.
It must be that bad.
Yeah. Well, we both worked yesterday, so I think I had an easier night than he did.
Gotcha. I mean,
usually does.
Yeah, I wake up at 2 a.m. for work too. So, I feel you guys. But I mean, working if you work a 24-hour shifts, there's not budgeted time to sleep, right? I mean, you sleep if you can, right? But if you have a call that's an emergency, obviously you go, right?
You get up, yeah.
So you could sleep 10 minutes or an hour, right? I guess it depends.
Yeah, you could get 8 hours of interrupted sleep, or you could get 0.
Right.
So, and it just depends. And like, so we're both captains, and so like my station, I've got the chief, who I drive the chief, and then we've got a pumper, a truck, and an ambulance. So you got 4 chances to get woke up during the night. Typically, you're going to get woke up.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned, but way back in the day, I was an EMT for a while when I was in California, and certainly don't have the experience that you guys have. But you had people who were there for the right reasons and people who were there for the wrong reasons, right? And I'm sure you get that too. But and you're kind of talking about motivation and attitude, and I think that's contagious. So if you have somebody, which I've seen as well, I've had soldiers who they have a bad attitude, but then that's where a little bit of empathy and compassion comes in, and then you find out why. And sometimes it's because they had a bad experience with an NCO, or sometimes the unit is toxic, and then you have a lot of work on your hands. But you just slowly start to change that culture, and it starts with you.
Oh, you mean you actually do something about that? You don't just throw your hands up and go, well, this sucks.
Yeah, good luck, right? I'm out of here in a year. It's the next guy's problem.
Yeah.
But I've seen that before. I mean, I've had, when you're on deployment, sometimes you'll get soldiers working for you from other units who they stay over. It's called an in-theater extension. They want to stay deployed longer, and that's fine. I mean, because sometimes they maybe don't have a family at home or don't have a job or whatever. But sometimes what I've seen is how different a soldier from another unit can be, because that other unit can do business entirely different, have a different set of values. I mentioned command philosophy earlier, and then you're trying to adopt them to your culture. But also I've seen sometimes where the system failed, because I've seen people who you get evaluated. I'm sure you have some type of evaluation or performance metrics, and they've kind of kicked the can down the road. And I've gotten people before to where I have to evaluate them, and I look at their evaluation, and I say, it says they volunteered 100 hours. They didn't volunteer 1 hour for me. I'm like, I think, they buttered this up, and now I'm getting kind of like, different shade of lipstick on a pig.
Filling up, that's a thing.
Exactly. Yeah. But having, attitude is so important. Having to perform at your best. Same thing as the military. I mentioned earlier, when you're tired, when you're hungry, that's why you have a lot of these schools like Ranger School and things. They evaluate you when you've slept 2 hours a day and you're having to carry a bunch of stuff and you're tired and so to have to go and save somebody's life on no sleep, that must be just be adrenaline. You mentioned training before, and just we call them SOP, standard operating procedures, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you get to a call and everybody knows their job, right? And
in theory,
well, I mentioned before the different schools I've been to, when they evaluate you as a leader, I kind of got away from thinking, okay, here's how to solve this problem. You think back to, you call it like battle drill and alpha. They're shooting at us here. Okay, you guys return fire. We're going to flank them. But it doesn't always work that way. You have to be creative.
Yeah.
And we mentioned ingenuity, and sometimes you might only have you and one other guy, and then that's what happened when I was in officer candidate school. Is I did everything correctly, but the bunch of the unit got wiped out, and I think I was the only one left. But I still, so it didn't quite go according to plan.
Well,
but
the officer lived,
exactly.
Mission success.
Yeah. But they were evaluating things like, did you understand what you were supposed to be doing? Did you communicate that to everybody else effectively? Did you go the right way and not get lost, which is a big deal, because this was Fort Lewis, Washington, outside of Seattle, when it was just all green forest and it was easy to get spun around.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it didn't go according to plan, but the based on the metrics they're evaluating me on, I was able to pass that. They call it a lane or a STICS, a situational training exercise. Yeah. But and then it's also helping other people. I'd imagine we're mentioning how I think there must be nothing more motivating than if you have like a senior captain who's rolling up a hose or something just because you're short-staffed or somebody else is busy, and they're not doing that to be seen, but you see it. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. Many hands make light work,
right?
And you can tell the crews that operate that way and the people who lead that way, on a fire scene where you'll see, the chief trying to go over there and roll up some hose or something. And, you can tell because you got that young guy who's on a good crew. He ain't letting him do that, or, you see the captain there doing that kind of stuff or, whatever it may be. And they're passing that kind of thing on of, yes, this is technically firefighter work, but we're a crew, and we do all of this stuff together, and no one of us is better than the other. Whenever it comes to mopping the floor or washing the dishes or rolling up the hose, it's a job. We're all going to get it done. So
that's awesome.
And for me, that's a big thing of, it's important for the people in the leadership positions. Like if you do have that soldier or the firefighter or whatever, that's like been kicked down the road, and finally ends up on your crew. Well, what are you going to do? You still have to train that person. You still have to get them up to speed, because ultimately at some point you're going to have to rely on them to do something. And if you've taken no time and put in no effort, you've only got yourself to blame.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I read something today. There's I've one of my friends who's a public affairs officer in the Army. I think he just retired, and he connected me with a 2-star general who was a division commander and on the East Coast, and I'm going to talk to him. I try and go around and talk to my mentors before I take this new command I was talking about in April. But he had me read an article that he wrote. He does leadership consulting now, and it talks about how the organization reflects the personality of the leader. And so he said he took he took over some units to where the leader was trying to be a nice guy and be liked by everybody, but there was no discipline and standards relaxed, and people weren't passing PT tests.
We're not going to talk about standards.
Right.
It's 2023.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, they kind of take on and whatever's important to the commander that ripples down through the organization. So if you have a division commander or a corps commander, they're in charge of hundreds of thousands of people, but they still, we mentioned the command philosophy, which if it's that big, I guess you got to disseminate it electronically or whatever, because you're not always physically there, but you can still make an effort to be present as a leader. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to ask a question off topic. Is it true some departments to where if you end up on the news, you got to buy everybody like hamburgers or ice cream?
Donuts.
Donuts,
Yeah.
is it? Okay.
Donuts is, at least for ours.
Okay.
That's the thing.
It's completely off topic, but I was wondering if if you want to take one for the team, just intentionally get walk past the camera when they're live.
Everybody tries to hide.
Yeah,
They-
exactly.
They made it a little bit harder
Yeah.
for us to avoid that stuff. But actually, the whole donut tradition is kind of going away, mostly because they're so dang expensive now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
and we're looking at okay, well, the young guy he got on the news, or it's his first day or whatever, and somebody call him and tell him not to bring donuts. Don't spend $100.
Right. Right.
Well, and people are eating healthier too. So you buy a dozen donuts, maybe 1.5 get eaten.
Right.
Maybe.
There's no such thing as low-fat donuts, right? Just kidding.
Not that tastes good.
Not that tastes good, right?
Yeah.
And the
Keto.
healthy food's always expensive. And we
Yeah.
talked about inflation, so it's a lose-lose here.
That's even more expensive than the donuts.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, and these concepts we're talking about can apply to, I think, any leader in any industry or profession.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and in my opinion, just because there's just so many books about it and talks and I mean, everybody talking about what's a good leader. But yeah, in my experience, it's the ones who simply just care about their people. They show up, and they mentor them, develop them. We talked about how they set them up for success because they care about them and the organization. And that's why it really motivates me when I see students who are at these different schools who care about our first responders and our military, so they'll do fundraising drives, and it doesn't matter how simple it is. But I think, and kudos to parents out there who also instill those values in their kids of understanding service, because service it's not always financially advantageous, as we know. You don't do it for the money, and it's long hours, and it's dangerous, and you get tired, and you're away from your family. And I mentioned my buddy, the intelligence officer overseas, who we work for, let's just say one of the local departments here for police. He was saying he saw more combat, if you will, doing that than he did when he was overseas. And I'm serious. Than when he was on combat deployments. Yeah. And so he talked about how dangerous it is, and so it's very noble that people are interested and want to do that, and especially, I mean, I guess we won't get into politics, but I mean, with law enforcement, they've had it real tough with empirically with what's going on in society the last several years, and that makes it tough on them, and media too. Media, it's I read it's like one of the most hated professions behind politics. That might be old stats, but it's tough because people hate the media. I'll be honest with you, and I can tell you that at least where I'm at, these are good people who. The cool thing about local news is, this isn't somebody at the network in New York. I mean, nothing against them, but the people who are in local news live in the community. They don't just fly in every day or come in some limo or something. I mean, they live in the community. Their kids go to school here. They work here, and they care.
Yeah. I think most people probably don't have an issue with their local news. I think it's mostly the CNNs, the Fox News,
your entertainment networks.
And I can't speak to that, but I can tell you, at least locally, it's people who genuinely care. And the reason, of course, I'm biased, but if you keep yourself informed, you can have local policy that might impact you and your family more than a national policy.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw during COVID, and not to get into like kids with a mask or anti-mask, but the point is, I don't remember my lifetime of anybody ever paying. I mean, and I appreciate school boards a lot, but just the attention and the pressure on school boards to either make decisions or when there were elections for school boards because of those issues.
Yeah.
That made their job incredibly tough.
Yeah.
And the district my kids are in, I remember the board saying, I mean, and this is a smaller district, they got thousands of calls and emails just about people expressing their opinion.
Yeah.
And these are also public servants as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm biased, but anybody who wants to get into service for the right reasons, whether it's first responder or military, that's very, very noble because, I mean, it's, as you guys know, hours aren't great, doesn't always pay great, it's dangerous, but people have to do it, right?
Yeah.
Somebody has to do it. And
you can't outsource this stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not like there's going to be like what's the thing that the dude from Fire Department Chronicles did? Telefireman or something.
Tele
like that.
EMS,
Exactly.
Telefire.
Yeah.
That's never going to be a thing. Like you're always going to have
the tele EMS thing.
Yeah.
Well,
that might work. Like, that one's
Yeah,
real. You're not.
You're always like municipalities are always going to need to provide ambulance services, their fire service, police departments, public safety.
Yeah.
You're going to need that for your citizens just because, especially in a major metropolitan area, we live in a society where we're under an agreement of, we're going to behave this way and we'll all get along. Okay, well, that's great. Me and you and him and whoever, we're going to follow the rules, but there's a certain section of society that's not. And you need the police for that section of society.
Yeah.
And then, for the things like it's icy outside or it's raining or whatever, and you have a tree fall on your house, or you're driving down the road and you slide off and hit a pole. Okay, well, who are you going to call? You call 911, the fire department shows up, they cut you out of the car, they take you to the hospital, or they come and get you out of your house and turn the power off and, turn the gas off, and then the gas company and the electric company shows up and they do their thing. And, those emergency services are always going to be needed. And we've seen that in the past, what would you say, 5 years or so, the call volume nationwide has just exploded. I would almost say it's doubled at least, if not close to tripled.
I don't think it'd go that high.
I mean,
it's gone up by about 50%.
Well, think about it.
What we were running 5 years ago, what we're running today, is somewhere between 25-50% more with less staffing, or even if you're lucky enough to have the same amount of staffing.
So here's a number for you. Whenever we came on, the busiest pumper company in the city ran just over 3,000 calls. The busiest pumper company in the city.
You're talking almost 20 years.
Still, though, I didn't see that. I mean, it's been a gradual uptick, but I would say in the last 5 years,
it is faster now than what it used to.
Yeah. So, I mean, the need is always going to be there, and it's just getting more and more and more. Yeah. And we're getting less and less people into the profession.
Yeah.
So because of that service mindset is just not as prevalent, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, I mean, during COVID, you saw how, obviously emergency services aren't going to get canceled. You can't cut that.
Yeah.
But like you said,
we didn't get to work from home.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, my friends who are in law enforcement, I mentioned how tough they've had it in recent years, but my friends who work in the industry, I mean, law enforcement say, you can say whatever you want about them. You can even hate them. But if you have an emergency and you have to call them, they're going to show up and help you, even if you hate them. You know. And I mentioned the ride along I went on, and some of the people weren't happy to see them or they didn't like them, but they were there to help them. So how tough is that to where you have to constantly remind yourself you're doing important work, life-saving work, helping people, and sometimes, but it's tough on your morale when the people you're helping you don't care.
Nobody likes the principal because that's the one you
exactly.
got to see when you're in trouble.
Got to lay down the law. Yeah.
Yep. And that's
everybody likes the fun gym teacher who tells dirty jokes, or fireman.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what everybody likes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But definitely, yeah. I just going back to having we mentioned the bus earlier, having the right people on the right seats in the bus is important.
Yeah.
I think because one person could be a poison pill in any organization, and kind of as leaders, sometimes it's having some empathy and compassion and kind of getting to the root cause of it, and then sometimes you just have to get rid of them. I mean, and a big part of what I do and what we do in the military is counselings, to where you just get it on paper and you have a paper trail, but you just make it very specific. I mean, here's the job description here, and this isn't anything, right? And here's what you need to do, and then you have performance metrics, but at least that way it's objective. It's saying here's what you did do and didn't do. It has nothing to do with my subjective opinion. Yeah. But
standards.
At least, exactly. Exactly, standards, and it's kind of like John Wood. If you heard of John Wooden, who he was the UCLA, I went to USC, so it's tough to talk about. But he,
you know what, just one of the greatest basketball coaches ever.
I hate to admit that he was a great basketball coach at UCLA, but he was.
And I just bring him up because if I mentioned there's thousands of leadership books, but his is a good one because he talks about you got to get the small things right before you get the big things right. And his teams wouldn't necessarily do anything fancy or any trick plays or anything like that. It was just down to the details of getting their socks on right so they don't get blisters, so they're running maybe a little bit faster than the other team, and fundamentals and stuff like that.
We talk about that with like Gonzaga.
You
know, they've been a power for a while. I mean,
a long time.
They're not a Kansas.
Yeah,
but that's okay. But they're so good every year. Because of the little things. They play fundamental basketball. They don't turn the ball over. They take care of it. You know,
they play defense.
They play defense. Their passes are crisp.
Yeah.
They look for that open person. And they're so good every year. They're not worried about, this guy can shoot the three, or I'm going to watch my windmill dunk.
Yeah.
That's not what they care about. Little things.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like every time.
Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. I was just going to say crawl, walk, run.
Exactly. That's what we say. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you go by a firehouse and you always see the fire trucks are clean, they look good, they're positioned to where like you have the doors open. I know, and I'd imagine you get on your shift and like when I was an EMT, you make sure the ambulance is stocked, because what if you need something that's not there and somebody's life is on the line? And they talk about that in the military. So you have pre-combat checks and pre-combat inspections. So PCC is when you check yourself to make sure you have all your gear, and a pre-combat inspection is when a leader checks you. But I remember I was in it's called the Basic Officer Leadership Course. After you commission, then you have to go and train for whatever your job is. So it's a separate school. And I remember one of our instructors talking about how when he was in Iraq, I think they didn't do their PCCs and PCIs. And so this is back in the days where they're clearing houses. So they went in a room and the lead guy went black on ammo, I think. And so it didn't. So the point is, I mean, doing those small things right, it can add up to I mean, in this case, saving lives or losing lives. Yeah. So, incredibly important. Attention to detail is what we like to say.
That's
that was my favorite line of Jack Reacher.
Oh, was it?
In the TV show?
Attention to detail?
Attention to detail. No, I'm sorry, it was Details Matter, but...
Right.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. Well, they do. I mean, but that's part of being a leader.
Yeah.
Is, one, knowing what the details are.
Right.
And then making sure that the people you're responsible for know that they matter.
Yeah.
And why they matter.
Yeah. I mean, I had a great company commander when I was a platoon leader, who talked about how like you have all these different theories, and we mentioned books and taglines, and he called it kind of like cheerleader leadership, and that's all important. But he said it's going back to his experience. You got to know your stuff if you want to be a good leader. I mean, you can look the part and look good and say the right things and give good speeches because you have to as a leader, right? But if you don't know what you're doing, I mean, they're gonna find out.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna lose confidence in you, and that's why you have evaluations and you have some schools like Ranger School to where you can get peered out. Somebody gets peered out, which means you have squads of 10 people roughly. And I could be getting this wrong, but I know that basically the guys and ladies you're working with you'll be the lowest on the totem pole, and then you get booted out. Yeah. So I would imagine I'd imagine fire and police. I mean, if somebody's not pulling their weight and it continues to happen, or they don't care, or maybe they slip through the cracks, I mean, I'm sure, you either reassign them or put them behind a desk, or I'm not sure how it works, but I'm sure by the time I know it's so competitive though, I would imagine that they get the best people by the time they actually get to a department. I would imagine.
Well, that would be the hope.
Well, but you did mention how I know it's tough these days to recruit. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's, like I said, it's nationwide.
Yeah.
It's just, it seems like public service isn't high on the list of priorities. And I think that's part of a cultural shift in the country. People aren't really, it doesn't seem like people are really looking at, I'm going to do something for a career for the rest of my life, that's what being a police officer, being a firefighter, EMT, that's what that is, and that's kind of how it's been in the past of you're going to come in, you're going to do 25, 27, 32, and then you're going to retire, you're going to have a pension and all of this. Now it seems like people are, well, I'm going to go try this job for a couple of years, then I'll go do this job for a couple of years, and then, maybe by the time I'm 35 or 40, I'll figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life. Well, which is fine. I mean, I'm not opposed to people coming into the profession and trying it out, and if it's not for them, it's not for them. But at the same time, it makes it really hard because you're not able to retain and keep those numbers, and then it costs so much, and the time investment of getting people trained up, because it's not like, I'm not going to oversell it and say like this is rocket science. It's not, but there's a lot that goes into it, and if you want to be good at it, there's even more that goes into it of things that you need to know. And especially if you want to promote, there's things that you have to remember and be looking for on calls, that you don't have to as a firefighter. I mean, you should, but it's not expected that you know that stuff until you have some time and experience on. And people just aren't staying long enough.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, you pick up things and get better things. We mentioned like shooter's preference earlier. Like you probably have different tactics or different strategies, each firefighter. But yeah, that's definitely something that also in leadership they expect. The higher you get up is the more experience you have, and the buck stops with you. I mean, you have a battalion commander, has a staff, brigade commanders, but eventually they got to make the call. And then it's on them. So even though they have they get a lot of guidance and analysis from different people who have different specialties, but they got to make the call. Just like I guess the chief's got to make the call on some things. I would imagine that could impact the entire department. I would imagine, but great leadership comes great responsibility, and we've all seen people who are in leadership positions and they're not leaders. But I mentioned earlier the division commander who I was talking about his article about the organization reflects the personality of the leader. He was also telling me that you don't necessarily have to have a leadership position to step up and be a leader. I mean, we've probably all seen people who were like, hopefully they do get promoted because they're in a position where they should be in a leadership position because they're showing leadership. And then you have somebody else who somehow fell through the cracks and got promoted when they shouldn't have. And then that's when I mentioned before about the toxic culture I had to deal with. No, not at all. Not at all.
Failing up.
And then, And so in my example overseas is the person I had to evaluate. I mean, I think I gave them a fair objective evaluation, but my boss told me, look, if you let this person continue to slide and we just kick the can down the road, then that's on you, that those future soldiers have to deal with that. A leader who was allowed through the system to just somehow slip through the cracks and is just sliding by, doing the bare minimum, not showing up for work sometimes, showing up late, not caring, not going above and beyond, then that impacts that impacts, I think, that's toxic because it impacts future soldiers or future people in the organization, and then they get this impression of, well, somebody like this can exist in this organization. I want nothing to do with it, and then that hurts recruitment, like you said, because then they go and tell their friends that don't go near there. That's what they allow to happen there. So going back to
people see a small snippet of something
exactly,
and they run with it.
Like
there's bad apples everywhere. That's not the whole.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if that's your only experience with it, then that's your reality because that's the perception you got.
Well, and that's one of those things where, we talk about around the station and constantly try to remind people, and especially the newer people coming in, of, look, you run these calls, and this is like a customer service thing or whatever, but this may be the only time that these people ever interact with the fire department, or this may be the only time these people ever interact with the police department. Just be nice. Leave them they're already dealing with something. Like, it's not like they just called 911 for us to come over and say hello.
Exactly.
You know, there's something going on. So be polite, be professional, leave them with a good experience.
Yep. That
And-
applies to anything, I
Yeah.
think. Doing the right thing, and you're dealing with them on the worst day of their life, I'm sure, sometimes.
Mhm.
And so, and you're their first impression, maybe their only impression.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why, in the military you have honor guards and recruiters and drill sergeants, and you have these positions to where they're expected to be competent and experienced and the right person for the job, but also, especially when you represent your organization to the public, then that's why they specifically handpick those people, because that'll be sometimes it's the only impression the public has is whoever, like say the honor guard or the color guard, whoever. Then that's why it's important those standards are so high for them.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if they make the organization look bad, then you're right. Then they're seeing the bad apples and they think the whole thing is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Read that book, Legacy. You ever heard of that one?
Who's that by?
I'm not sure who it's by. I just bought the All Blacks out of New Zealand, the rugby
Interesting.
team, and how they changed their culture,
Really?
and how it was top down. Like you don't try out for the All Blacks.
Mhm.
They come ask you
Yeah.
to be on their team,
Yeah.
and it's not just how well you play. It's the content of your character.
Mhm.
Helping clean up the locker room after you celebrate. I mean, it's great that you won, but it's not that guy's job to clean up after us. So we clean up the locker room and it's the whole organization top down. If you ever get a chance to read that book, it talks about changing the
Awesome.
culture of your organization and how they did it, and how it's a sign of pride to wear the all black
Yeah.
jersey.
That's awesome. Yeah. To me, it has a deeper meaning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
it
like
was
that.
like and it was like stories. It wasn't just lessons. It was it started off like, of course, a story, and then how it changed and why. So it was. I think I read it in a day and a half. I was still laid up from surgery, so I had nothing else to do. I was like,
Right.
it got recommended, and I was like, okay, I read it. And I was like, that's a damn good book. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, legacy's important. Very, very important.
Yeah. Well, it's what you
That's
want to
great.
leave behind.
Exactly.
Leave it a little better than you found it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just about getting 1% better each day.
Yep.
Is what I like to focus on.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Very
Rob,
cool.
what's next for you, man? I mean, we know you're going to school, so
Yeah.
but what do you
Yeah.
got?
Yeah, everything's going well. I mean, in the military at least, I mentioned taking command of this new unit, and so I've got some schooling to get done for that, some schooling to get done to promote as well. So a lot of school this year, and then during our summer we have our 2-week annual training as well, which I got to be at. I'm the commander now. Yeah, but that, and then at Channel 929, KMBC KCWE, things are going well. We got a great team I mentioned earlier who they're doing good work and they care and they work hard. And we've got an honor flight coming up in April. I mentioned a little bit about because of COVID, and I haven't done one of those in a while, but that's a cool experience where we get our local veterans out to DC to see the memorials in their honor. This year we're going to go to the U.S. Navy Memorial. I guess we haven't been there before, but yeah, that's coming up in April. And then of course at least from the draft will be a big deal here in Kansas City, which of course we're gonna cover that wall to wall. Yeah. So
you got busy time coming up.
That's not news.
exactly right. Just fluff. Right?
Yeah.
Then you got the World
That-
Cup coming.
Yep, that's a big deal. And then it was great with the of course the Chiefs representing Kansas City. It's great for the city, but that was a big deal for us is covering the parade as well, which that was awesome. I was at 11th and Grand, I think. So yeah, it was fun. It was super crowded. Everybody was stoked to be there. I had families, kids, people from all over. And I had like people coming down from like Minnesota, some Chiefs fans down there. So
Did you get the final number of how many people were there for that? Because I heard like
Good question.
north of 800.
I think I'm not sure if it was more than the weather wasn't as bad as 2020, so
Yeah,
The
pretty
weather in
better.
2020 was horrid
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I was down there for that.
Nasty.
I was actually working it.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, it was nasty, but that was a big deal for us. And then of course, here we are, late February with the new KCI Kansas International Airport terminal opening, which is awesome. It's beautiful. Yeah, I thought it was great, and I've seen a lot of airports, a lot of cities, and so that's exciting moving forward. So we've. And then, of course, you have sweeps and media, which is the 4 months throughout the year where you get your rating. So that's when you really try and put your best work forward and do your special projects. So, so on the media side, just going to keep trying to do what we mentioned earlier is just showcasing the work of organizations in town doing good work, and then trying to continue to get because some people don't know I've been back since technically on air since December, but I still get people asking me if I'm back yet. So I'm like, I take it you don't watch us because I'm on like 5 days a week, and then they always feel bad, but I'm just messing with them. So yeah, we're gonna keep just trying to do good work on the media side and during sweeps and continuing to try and be an advocate. It's kind of cliche, I guess, but the whole point of why media exists, at least local media, like we said, is to give a voice to the voiceless, and you're supposed to hold the powerful accountable. And I believe I've read before that if you have areas that aren't covered by any media at all, then they can be more prone to, say, corruption. I mean, there's no oversight, there's no watchdog, there's no investigative reporter to expose something, and so it's called a media desert. And so the point is, places like that, you're not going to have anybody who's there to fight for you, and so we're going to keep doing that. And then, I mean, media, it's a free service that you provide working for people, because we get people who will contact us, and sometimes we can help them, sometimes we try and refer them to organizations that can. But yeah, we'll keep doing that. And then and then the military side going to be gone more than normal this year, but I appreciate the support I get from Channel 9, and they've always been very supportive of what I do, and I appreciate that, because I know it's a sacrifice. Of course, they have to fill in for me when I'm gone, but yeah, it'll be a good opportunity to do very similar work on the military side as I do on the civilian side, but kind of being more of like a news director or a manager or a general manager. And then the MPAT I mentioned earlier, the Mobile Public Affairs Detachment, it's not a very big unit. There's it's like platoon or size, so anywhere from like 20 to 40 people, something like that. But it depends. So it's not like a line unit. It could be like 120 people plus attachments. Yeah. And so that'll be a good opportunity, because they're responsible for covering a lot of these military events that happen throughout the year, throughout the month. So you could have like a shooting competition, like a marksmanship competition. You could have like, say, air assault tryouts. So you got all sorts of helicopters doing cool stuff, and you have other stuff that it's good footage. And so we will have our soldiers cover that same way as a reporter or journalist would. And then we push that out, so that helps with the families, like it helps with the morale, it helps with recruiting. In the beginning, we're talking about public affairs and talking points, and overseas, everything we would publish would have a purpose to a specific audience. It could be families, it could be our allies, it could be our enemies. But the whole point is it has a specific message that we're trying to get out there. Yeah, and so I'll keep doing that. I'm a little over halfway to, I guess, 20 years. But yeah,
you gonna finish out the 20?
I'm gonna try, unless I get kicked out. I mean, I'm over halfway there, right? And then and then when you
just remember, promote up.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes they say up or out, right?
Yeah.
So
just keep failing up. That's all.
I mentioned with these schools, I mean, it's easy to prioritize your civilian education or your career, your family, but you get racked and stacked in the military, just like you get evaluated maybe like in a department, like who's your best firefighter and who's at the bottom. I mean, I'm not sure how it works, but in the military, you're ranked amongst your peers in your peer group. You can be at the top, the middle, or the bottom. Yeah. and so with these schools, you can do a memo. So when you're evaluated, which we have coming up soon, it's every fall. It's called the Leadership Development and Assessment Program, the LDAP, which is for officers. And that's when you say, here's what you're doing, here's what you want to do, here's your education you got to get knocked out. And if you don't have it done, then you just have to do a memo saying, I didn't get it done, but it's in progress. But they don't, the board will only buy that a couple times, and then they'll say, you need to get it done. You're dragging your feet on this. Yeah. So going to keep doing that. I hope to connect with all the organizations I've worked with before, and as we get into kind of gala season in the spring and summer, and golf season, and participating in events, and sometimes I'll MC events, and then it's fun to participate because you don't have to work it. Because when you're working it, you got to be on your best behavior. You know what I mean? And you have to inhale your food, because as soon as you sit down to eat, they need you to do something. Because as an MC, you're working for the organization for free, which is obviously worth it and great to be a part of. But yeah, so those are a lot of fun. We've got that coming up, and really, just continuing to try and contribute to the community any way I can with the platform I have is the game plan for me. And then just
we'll teach you how to eat while you MC.
I'll tell you what, you just eat it, and then you taste it later. Just like like your basic training, you just inhale your food.
Yeah.
And then
Don't think I'm never taking a plate on the rig with me and eating
exactly.
on the way.
Yeah.
Cereal's hard.
Cereal sucked.
Yeah.
Sandwiches were pretty easy.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't do a steak unless it was already cut up.
Yeah, but looking forward to doing that and have a lot of those are professional goals, have a lot of personal goals. Yeah, always wanted to bench 220 and I'm at 215 and I'm trying so hard to get there. I mean, stuff like that, I can't bitch what you guys can.
Yeah. No,
I can't touch that anymore.
Yeah. No,
But that, and then you're trying to read more, write more, stuff like that, and I think that's important. We talked a lot about mental health earlier, not just talk therapy, but I think it's, I don't want to say cliche, but I think writing down things helps as well. I know some organizations advocate that because it's a way to get it out, whether it's spoken or written. So that's important for people, I think, to do, to write. Reading's important, and whenever you can, if you got 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there, to try and read, and then of course time is important. When you're gone for a long time, you like on deployments, you have technology to communicate, but you really appreciate that time more. Just like if you're on a bad call, or like countries I've been to where people would do anything to live in the United States, it gives you a different perspective and you appreciate things. If we mentioned the tough calls you've been on before, and you feel for that family, but it makes you appreciate your family and just understand that time is finite, and so my first deployment, I talked about trying to live twice as hard when I got home, meaning like to be present with your family, because you can be doom scrolling on social, or you can be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're there, but you're not really there, so after my first deployment, definitely my second one, I try and be more engaged, and I'm far from perfect, but I appreciate the time, because we know it's not the hour of the master cometh, the Bible says. So so definitely that's what's ahead for me, and looking forward to continuing to support the work you guys are doing and trying to help first responders any way I can, military any way I can. I appreciate what you guys do.
You have to let us know what events are coming up that we can see if we're off, and
absolutely
see what we can do.
And let me say one more thing real quick, just to plug for first responders, is I noticed on the ride along, and especially in the media, is unfortunately a lot of times you see the bad stuff on the news, and it's not the media intentionally trying to make first responders look bad. It just, there's a lot of explanations for it, but I can say that there's a lot of good stuff that happens, like we mentioned, caring about the people you're helping, that's very empathetic and compassionate that first responders do. I mean, like when like law enforcement will say give somebody water, or somebody they have a warrant, or they did something illegal, so they're taking them to jail, but they're still giving them water, or letting them call somebody to get their car, or call somebody to tell them about their bond. Like little things like that, I notice it's very, very compassionate, because they don't have to do that. I'm sure same thing with fire, is you can do the bare minimum, or you can go above and beyond. And when I was an EMT, it's the same thing I noticed, is you go call to call, but you think, well, what happened to that person who we helped? And then sometimes the outcome, it's not what you wanted, and talking about mental health, I'd worked with people who you had tough calls. I mean, nothing like you've seen, because we were just BLS. I was just EMT 1. But so I was mainly doing sniff to sniff, skilled nursing facility, taking folks from nursing homes to hospitals and back. But some of the calls you go on, like one, you're taking somebody home for basically it's a hospice run, for an end of life hospice run. So they're going home to be with their family in hospice. And so we get to this house, and the whole family was there, and this guy was working with, who was talking about becoming a paramedic. He's going to become the fire chief, and I mean, he had big goals, which is great, but he couldn't handle that. And he quit. And then we had another call to where it was a controversial call, because I think it should have been an ALS call, but what happened is this person, he was kind of heavy, labored, breathing, and it seemed like he was kind of having a heart attack, we thought. So we took his vitals. His doctor said he's fine. His doctor said run him to the hospital, and we did, and then he got worse as we're going over there, so we go code 3 and give him what we could. I mean, we were just BLS. We just had oxygen and a few things. But he got there, and then he had rails, which we had identified before, so he had the rattling, in his chest. And so then the charge nurse said, listen to this, and we said, that's what we said initially, is that this should have been an ALS call. So they got him into surgery. I don't think he made it though, and so the guy was with, he couldn't process that either. So it's definitely I think people should have an understanding of what you guys go through, and that first responders go through a lot, but they're good people, I mean, you mentioned bad apples, but every profession has bad apples.
Every single profession has bad apples
and
somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, there's no selection process. That's 100%.
Yeah.
So.
But I appreciate you guys doing this, the work you do, and the content you talk about. It's all very important. Very appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming, doing the show.
Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah.
So, all right, we'll end this episode like we do everyone. If you are struggling, reach out. There are resources out there. We talked about several of them. If you know somebody that is struggling, reach out. Let them know you care. Let them know what the resources are. And, take care of each other. And we will see you next time.